Well, let's go ahead and jump in. I want to welcome you guys to another installment connected here with board leadership. We're going to be talking about the critical role of recruiting and orienting board members today. And we're excited about that. Just a couple housekeeping items. We will be emailing out the PowerPoint to you after the session. So just know that you'll receive that. So you can be looking for that. We are recording today as well. And so this video will be posted to the resources section of our website in the next couple days. If you want to revisit anything or share it in your networks or just use that in any way moving forward. Heather is going to be teaching through a lot of great stuff today. And so we really want to encourage you to use the chat box as well. If she says something that you want to comment on, feel free to do it there. If you've got some specific questions, put them in the chat box, and then Heather and I will take a look at that, and we'll make sure to get those questions answered for you. So use the chat box in any way that you'd like to this morning. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for today. God, I thank you for just another day to serve you and to be used by you. God, we thank you that you invite us into a partnership to meet needs, advance the gospel, build the kingdom, and make the world a better place. I thank you for each leader on this call. I pray that you would just speak to them individually today, allow them to hear just what you want them to hear for right where they are in ministry. Just pray that you would bless Heather today, and we just lift her up to you. Pray that you would speak through her and just share through her again what you'd like us to hear. So we just commit this time to you, and we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Well, excited to be together today. And this is a topic that is really practical. And it's one that got birthed for me out of my board experience. In fact, my very first board that I served on, I was placed immediately on the board development committee because they thought somehow that I had this wild, all this experience, which I did have none. So the team that I was on, we began to discover and learn a lot about what is the significance of building your board, and it starts with your people. So when you want to build a healthy board of people that are engaged, that are really affecting the strategic direction of your organization, it starts with having the right people. And so finding those people and engaging those people, that's really the beginning of this board building cycle. And this is something Board Source has some great tools on, that if, that you can purchase their book that is called The Board Building Cycle, and it really will go through all of those ideas. But as we look at this topic of orientation, recruiting, orientation, and onboarding, we're looking at how do we help board members come into engagement with us for a purpose that says God has something he's raised this organization up for, and these passionate leaders that are feeling called to that ministry have a way to engage. There's a natural life cycle for every board. It's called terms, so people aren't on a board forever. But the board is going to go through this process that will continue to enable them to be more effective and to build well. And we don't want board members to feel like we're actually going in circles. The cycle is just a matter of going into circles, but we want them to feel like we're going somewhere, it's maturing over time, and that we're making a difference. Because that's why people want to join our board, is because they care about the things we care about. So recruiting quality board members who are passionate about our nonprofit cause, our purpose, we're looking for people who have the maturity, the faith, the same heart and passion that the reason that our organization exists. And one of the things I find it was interesting as I've worked with different boards, been on boards, is when we take this process to God and we are looking for the right people, God doesn't always bring the ones you think he will. So you may have in your mind, oh, I know the perfect board member, and you're as a team praying about it, and you're doing all the right things, and you don't get that person, but you get this other person. That's one of the things I love about being a part of faith-based nonprofit work, is because God loves to use people that we don't always imagine. So we want to keep our eyes open as we are finding people and learning to engage people and trusting that God is bringing the right people to us. When we just to start this out, let's talk about kind of the elephant in the room, and that is, whose job is this to find new board members? And if you're a part of an organization that's founder led and just started in the first 3 years, that job does start with the founder, because they're the one with the vision. They're bringing the organization together. They're putting all of this together. And so it is a responsibility that founder, that executive director starts with, but it should never remain there as this is the job of the executive director. Any organization that is growing, any board that is maturing, the board is the one that actually has to own it. And the search for board members is an ongoing collaborative effort, which means that it's a board culture thing. This is creating a culture in your board that we are here to build our board, to find the people that we think are the right people for our board so that we can do the thing that God's called us to do. And, for small boards, if you're a board that is 3 people that is trying to get to 5 to be a little bit stronger, healthier, more people contributing, if you're moving from 5 to 7 or 7 to 9 or 11, then this role many times is delegated down to a committee, an appointed committee. Sometimes people call it a governance committee. Sometimes it's called a board development committee, but it's individuals who are coming together to do the work of the board to get everything in order to then find, recruit, bring on, and then present to the board those people that they are nominating, recommending to the board to join. So this really never should be a sole responsibility of the executive director, of the chief, depending on what you call that person, the CEO. But it starts there, but that needs to be owned by the board as an ongoing collaborative effort. If we find ourselves in a position where we're scrambling because we're just at the edge of our bylaws that say we have to have 3 people, and we've got 3 today, and we know one's going to have to move off, we're moving from this an urgent, critical moment to moving it toward an ongoing collaborative effort. We're always looking for the right people, and we want to bring them on in the right way. Because this is a stat that I think is pretty unsettling, that only 73% of the executive leading the organization believe they have the right board members to effectively govern the organization. Now, that is not a stat that we want to represent. It's not one that we want to maintain. But to say, how do we get out of that place if we really look at our boards? And you could be an executive director today thinking, oh, I think we have the right people, or maybe I agree with this, and I'm part of that, that 17% that says, we don't have the right people. Or maybe you're a board member and you're not sure if you are. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is, how do we get that ball rolling, moving in a direction so that we have that confidence that we can recruit and bring people on to be able to have the right people to lead our organization. So this is not about filling slots. It's not about the urgency. We want to find leaders who both have the skill set and the perspectives that align with our organizational purpose, our mission, the strategies that we have in front of us, the goals, and not just now, but the right people that are going to lead us into the future. That's the vision that we're having, is who are those people that are going to help us move toward that future? So we're not just looking for one great person that's going to solve all of our problems because they were a CFO in the past, or somebody who's been a nonprofit leader. It's bringing in that right mix of a group that will blend the skills, the expertise, the maturity level, the perspectives, and the influence so that we as a whole organization, a whole board, can make the right decisions moving the organization in the right way for our future. So we're going to move away from those stats to how do we do that? And I would say where I think the most important thing to do is to start by laying some really important foundations. Now, if you're an organization that has been in existence for a long time, and we had in one of our last trainings, we had an organization that was celebrating 75 years in that the ministry has existed. Okay, that's a very developed organization. But you can still go back and look at these foundations and go, do we have these things in place? The good news is for those of you that are small, that are just working on building your boards, these things, though they take time, are an investment that will pay priceless dividends. And so working through these steps and ensuring that you have the right foundations, that's going to lead to being able to bring on the right people, attracting the right people to your board, because they're going to know what your board does, how your board functions, and they're going to get excited about contributing to that, and not that fear of, oh gosh, I'm going to just sit in some meetings and I'm going to have to listen to a lot of reports, and they're going to want money from me. That's the fear. And when good board members see and hear organizations that have laid a really strong foundation for board recruitment, they get excited about being a part of something like that. So this process, it is an investment of time, but it can be done just one step at a time, or with that small committee group. It could be someone that you've delegated it to, or the whole board can divide and conquer and say, hey, we're going to take just small chunks to work through this. I've been doing this, particularly this last year, with 4 different boards, and they're all in different places. But I can say the difference of these organizations, no matter that process, the confidence that the board has, the excitement that they feel moving forward, it's definitely creating a culture in their board that says, we know what we want to do, who we are, and what we're looking for. So we're going to start with number 1, looking at clarifying your board culture and expectations. We do an activity that kind of gets the ball rolling on this. And this is an activity that you could do in your next board meeting. It could take 15 minutes, you could take in half an hour. If you have a board retreat coming up, this is a wonderful activity to start off a board retreat, and even on the back end, end it and kind of come out with your what I call, what is the flavor of your board? It's an activity that is really meant to be it's kind of a cross between an envisioning session of what do we want to be, and I would also say maybe a look under the hood of who we actually are activity, and to define how do we describe our board as it is today? Would we say, hey, we are a lean, mean fighting machine, or, we're a board that's just getting started, but we really want to build well. We're a board that is of solid professionals. We're a board of people who are full of faith. So when you think about that right now, how would you begin to describe your board as it is? And think of those things that makes you excited about, and the things that also becomes challenging and says, gosh, as a board, we've got a lot of very passionate people, but as board members, very few of them have had board experience. So we're trying to figure ourselves out at where we are. Then I would say that second question is, what makes your board unique? When you think of the different kinds of tasks that God's called you to, what makes the board that you're on unique? So when you look at other boards, most boards, when people think of a board, they think of a lot of Robert rules. They think of, okay, these formal things. But how do you make decisions on your board? Are you a board that really takes the time to discern where God's leading? Are you a board that is, willing to walk by faith when things look impossible, but you're believing and, challenging? Are you a board, what is our unique qualities that would make people interested in your board? And maybe it's something that you just had hints on, but you ask that question that says not only who are we today, but who do we want to be? And you start to get board members sharing ideas of what they would hope, what they're envisioning, what they would want this board to look like. And you start to feel the energy rising in the room. And then this last question is just what does it take to be successful as a board member on their board? What at the, if I a year from now I'm a board member, how will I feel fulfilled? What's it going to be to that? What's the time commitment? So, what's the values and the qualities that would make somebody successful in this board? Man, they're a good listener. We need people that listen well, that are discerning. What are those things that you would say would make your individual members on your board successful and feel fulfilled at the end of the day? So this is the kind of activity that just opens up a lot of conversation. It's not meant to come down with a bunch of things written and figured out, but it just gives us an ability to dream, to look at who we actually are, even face some of the things that maybe people haven't said but need to be said. And so they just start to open it up. So this is about that process of clarifying, who are we? What's our culture like? What are some of the expectations? But it doesn't finalize anything. Just a great activity to get people talking. So that, as you start to identify what that is, I wouldn't say the word clarified has happened yet, but through this process, you will have that clarification coming about. The next step number 2 is building a board composition profile. So this gets a little bit more into some details. So you take that envisioning, that looking under the hood, and then you have another time where you start to say, okay, we're going to build a profile that says, now that we've envisioned some of the things, what should every board member be like? That's character qualities, qualifications. What should they do? What should they care about? So now we're talking about, what is that unique passion that you want people to have that's centered around your mission and your purpose for your organization? What should people be caring about? So this helps you as a group to define, what are the people like that we want to draw, we want to attract? So simply answering that question, it could be some groups have bulleted that out in a session and they just have a bunch of bullets that they put down about that. Again, this is an internal document that's taking the conversation, that one activity, and now making it clear in writing to say, here's what our profile of a board member should look like. The second question really now talks not about what everyone should be like in consistency, but what are the diversity that we want to represent? So if you think about your board and the people you're serving, are there some different traits that you want to have a broad representation? So some boards that I've worked with, they want to have representation of different ethnicities because they're working internationally and they want to represent some of the different areas that they are serving so that there's a perspective of that. It could be male and female. It could be age differences of traits. It could be lots of different factors that as a board, you say, what are those factors that we want to have a representation on? And the things that people, I keep using the word represent, but that's it. What do they represent? And are there any gaps? And that's what we're going to figure out as we look at it. So we're looking at that. And then the last things are the areas of expertise. What are the skills, the life experiences? And when people do a board composition profile, a lot of times they focus primarily on the expertise and the skills and life experience and wealth. But those are things that I think are critical because you do want to fill your board with people that have different experiences and can contribute and give wisdom to those things. But that's not the only thing. So looking at these areas and we have a worksheet that you can actually work through as a board and just bullet your answers to these kinds of questions. You don't have to have a worksheet. You can have these 3 questions and just talk through them. But the goal is to not necessarily find out what your ideal board is, but to be strategically thinking about what do we need at this time. So I would say in a committee, if you have a board governance committee, this is an exercise that the board governance committee should look at on an annual basis just to say, what do we need now? Because we're ongoing recruitment process that's collaborative across the board, we need to be thinking about where are we at now? What are our needs now? And so we're not just thinking of a pie in the sky board and everything would be perfect, but what is it right now that we need? If you're a startup board, you might have some different needs than that board that's been around for 15, 20 years. So you need to think about what are those different areas. ECFA, they have put this together. And I didn't lead with this because I love to see boards do some of their own thinking. But after boards have done that and they've sat down and they've written a profile, the ECFA has given their 6D criteria for board members. And I think there's some really valuable things on here. And if you go to their website, they will outline this in greater detail. But they say you're looking for a discerning decision maker. So, when you bring board members on, identifying how have they made decisions? How do they look at developing policies? What's their experience in strategic thinking, and particularly from a faith perspective? How have they demonstrated passion in this area? Is this something that this cause that they have shown consideration and interest in and involvement with in the past? Documented team player. There's nothing like bringing on board members who've got incredible skills, but they like to be the dominant, controlling, directing, influence voice that only everyone listens to. So they've highlighted having competent group processing skills, being a great listener, leveraging other people's skills, being about how do we become collaborative, being diligent, faithful participant. Now, this means you're actually giving time to volunteer, to show up at events, and setting that expectation. I love the doers walks the talk. So it's one thing if somebody has all the right words, it's another thing if they're saying, I live this out. How do other people see these people? Do they walk the talk? Are they a living example, a model for the kind of leader that you want in your organization? And then also being a generous, or as Vanjie said it, a sacrificial giver to the organization, meaning they have put not only their time, but also their talent and their treasure. They're investing. So this is the criteria they've come up with. There's nothing wrong with looking at what people have developed, but then adopting it for yourself and saying, this is what we want our board members to look like. Because again, this is board owned. We need to go, who are the leaders that we're looking for? And then here, this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. Once you have developed that profile and you have a good idea of what you're looking for, then we encourage people to put this on a spreadsheet. And this is, this is a long spreadsheet. So this would go, this top line is the first part. And these people said, we do want to have a balance between male and female. We do want to have some diversity in age. We do have some, because we're working internationally, we're looking for some people on our board in all three of these regions. We have different experiences we're looking for, different skills, what their background, their actual profession is, and their wealth capacity. And when what they do is they're actually then taking and putting their current board member names underneath this and going through this spreadsheet and just checking off, all right, is this a male or a female? What's their age range? Which ethnicity do they represent? What are the different experiences? Just checking it off. It's not, writing it all down, but having one single document that you can look at and see what's the makeup or the composition of our board. How many males do we have? How many females do we have? What's the age ranges? What's the ethnicity balance? On this single document, you can see so clearly where the gaps are. And this helps people, see what do we need. And then once you've looked at what your current board represents, then you put down, when you bring in the possibility of new people, these potential board members, you list their names and you begin to work through these things and what do they represent, to see if you're able to find different people that help fill the gaps and even give different areas of expertise or different perspectives to your board. So this is a profile that is really helpful to have on an ongoing basis. Just outline what are your current people, and as you're recruiting and looking at potential new board members, what do they represent and how would that make our whole board a very well-balanced and full board? So I said a lot just going through clarifying your board, doing that activity, doing your board composition. Are there some comments or questions that Jonathan, anyone has had that we want to capture before we move on from here?
Yeah, perfect. And you just touched on this a little bit, but Kyle was wondering, do you have a suggested mix of expertise backgrounds that make a helpful mix of board members? Obviously, it depends on, right, the kind of focus your board is going to have, but based on your experience and working with some other groups, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and it is one that every board needs to say, what do we actually need? Because that idea of an ideal board, you could bring someone on that has legal experience, but if you're an organization that doesn't really work in that place, so we've got a bunch of organizations that are doing such creative work, but they really don't run into a high risk legally. But then there's other organizations that they're actually, one brand new nonprofit that we've been working with, they're helping to provide um, mortgages for single mothers who need to get their first home. There's a lot of legal factors in that. There's a lot of things that are related even just to the mortgage world. So that organization, that board needs to look at what kind of expertise do we need that might be very different from another. So what we have done on this list, I mean, there is some very generic questions you can ask, like, has someone had background in nonprofit boards in the past? Have they had leadership in a nonprofit? Have they had background in legal or in financial or in HR? So there's a lot of those generic things. Some of those you can look at and as an organization go, we really don't need a lot of that now on our board. But kind of, I'll go toward a little bit of hinting to the training that we're going to do in June on committees. There's a great opportunity to not necessarily bring all those kinds of areas of expertise onto your board, but to use them on different committees. So the question is, on a board that is really calling for what's the direction of this organization to fulfill this mission and vision, the skills become a little bit secondary, in my opinion, and you could probably make an argument for that, but that they are closely aligned to your vision and mission. So skill, and I'm going to show you a slide just on that in a second, but is looking at what are the skills that you really need right now, and then looking at that. So the document that we have that looks like this, and this is an actual spreadsheet that we have on Google Docs that you can take, and it's a template. Every organization we've worked with, they've changed these different things. So there's a group of them listed here, but some of them, they delete a whole column. And they go, we don't need global missions and theology. That's not something we need on our board. But it's on here because we've worked with a lot of people that do work internationally. Or they say a person that's an expert in finance, and you say, we really need kind of a CFO here because we need to work on a lot of our financial reporting and work on that. So you might highlight that as a critical need in this time. So short answer, there isn't a one size fits all. I don't think you want to try to get everything on your board in terms of skill, but to look for these ones and to say what seem to be the most critical ones now. And then you're going to keep recruiting. So if something comes up and you say, we are going to have to do a capital campaign, you might be looking on your committees or in your network and say, we want to bring on a pastor who just did this wildly successful capital campaign and recruit them onto your board. So because it's an ongoing practice, you may change who you think needs to be done. So that's why this ongoing nature is really critical. So that was a long answer. John, anything else that was on the questions?
No, I think for right now we're good to move forward.
It's a great question though. Yeah. So the next step in here is then taking that profile and actually writing up a job description. And we do this for positions of individuals that are staff, but to have a written job description for the board is really critical. And this is a high level, one size fits all job description that says, what are those general qualifications? So, on this particular one, you can see this is a sample that came from an organization we worked with at some point. And their first qualification is demonstrate commitment to Christ and enthusiastic endorsement and support of this particular organization's mission, purpose, core beliefs, and operating principles. So that was a qualification that they said, we have to have someone that does both of these things here, or they're familiar with our materials that we use, our programming, our training. We're able to clearly communicate it so that we're not trying to figure out how to communicate it, but that people already know how. Then they have on their qualifications attendance in board meetings, and they're already stating right up front, this is 2 to 4 of them per year, in addition to committee work where required. So they haven't, excuse me, said that committee work is required here, but they've said that that is possible. Some organizations, committee work is a requirement of their board, so it's a qualification, time to do both. And then, going down, they've also identified contributes to one of these particular areas. So they outlined what to answer that question that you just asked. They want people that have strong networking, building, strengthening the partnerships, resource development, financial acumen, administrative leadership, and pastoral skills. So looking for people in one of those particular areas. So they've put that right on their job description, saying these are the things we're looking for, at least one of these areas. So that's that general idea of what are the qualifications, and as well as starting to list some of that area of commitments that we're looking for. Then you get more specific into the job description. And this is just a sample. I'm not intending for you to read it or copy it all, but we can give you these samples. Some of them are on our website already. But this highlights all of the core responsibilities for being on a board of directors. This is pretty standard boilerplate that you can say it different ways, but that as a board, your corporate responsibility, the one board, one voice, you are responsible for determining the mission and the purpose of your ministry. You're responsible for selecting, supporting, encouraging, evaluating the executive director, for effective organizational planning, to ensuring ensuring resources, ensuring effective management of the resources, monitoring the programs, enhancing the public standing, and ensuring legal, ethical integrity, and maintaining accountability. So this corporate responsibilities outlines for a new person and for everybody. These are the responsibilities that you as a board of director have by being on the board. So it's really clear the level of authority and responsibility that you have as a board member. And then getting down into what does that mean for individuals? And this is a detailed list that really touches on lifestyle. So this, example is maintaining a lifestyle exemplary of a born-again follower of Christ. They're really defining what are we looking for as a qualification. They talk about attendance, prep for the meetings. They talk about participation of being on a board committee, having relationships with other board members, attending events that are put on by the organization. So they're really outlining as much detail as possible, saying at least, attend organizational functions and special events as often as possible, at least every 3 years. So that's a pretty low bar for this organization if you have to attend an event once every 3 years, but that was what this organization chose. Talking about sacrificial, generous giving, and they even define it in the first quarter or monthly. Prayer, that's a great thing to add to a job description for a board member. Endorsing, advocating for the ministry, using your network to widen the visibility of this or promoting it. Recruitment of other board members is on the job description. Staying informed by being familiar with the communication that goes out and following all policies. So again, this can be said in lots of different ways, and you don't have to start from zero. We have all of these kinds of tools and templates, and all that you need to do is make dedicated time to go through it. And as a group or a couple of people, to start to identify what is us specifically. Who are we as a board? How would we say this? We can delete it, we can change it, we can adjust it. But as long as at the end of the day, you come out with a job description that clearly defines the expectations of what does it mean to be on a board. That's the goal. And even having just a specific job description that you can share with potentials, those potentials know, okay, this organization knows what they want, they mean business, they're clear. If they do this for the board, they're probably doing a good job defining jobs also in the organization. So it really builds a lot of confidence, and it says we're going to function up here. We're being intentional and strategic about what we are doing as a board and how then the organization runs. This is that slide that I mentioned, that is when you look at the criteria for board members, you want to look at this balance between alignment to the vision, mission, and the culture of the board to be balanced to areas of expertise and experience. Because if you have high expertise and experience, but a low alignment to your vision and mission, that's where a lot of challenges happen in boards, where you get someone who's got an area of expertise, they've got influence, they've got experience, and they start sharing that, and it can absolutely shift the organization, cause mission drift, because they're such strong in that one area of expertise. And it doesn't mean that that area of expertise doesn't need to be brought into the organization, but it can adjust it. So I'll give an example that I experienced on a board in the last 5 years myself. And that is being on a board where there was somebody that had really high HR experience. And in that HR experience, they realized that some of the practices legally that were going on in the nonprofit did not match the legal standards. So they put on their volunteer hat, worked alongside of their HR person, made some adjustments, did a lot of things, and that organization started to shift towards some of these HR related things that really moved them from kind of the very core essence of who they were as an organization, very faith driven, and it started moving toward really tight policies. And they had to take a step back and go, wait a minute, who are we? And does this really reflect who we are? We need the legal perspective, but we don't want that thing to pull us so far into that direction that we're not who we actually are. Living by faith, trusting God, believing certain things, and balancing how do we follow the legal responsibilities and maintain our culture of who we are, the values that we have with our people. So I just think this is really good to say you want to find people that have a high alignment to your vision, mission, and your board culture, and they have areas of expertise and experience that will help the board move forward. All right, moving on to this number 4. And I would say this info packet, creating an information packet that you can give to prospective board members, this is one of my favorite things to develop with an organization, because it pulls all of this conversation, this owning the recruitment process, who we're looking for, getting the right people on, puts it all together in a very simple tool that then enables the organization to represent that and to share it with other people with confidence, and really representing that intentionality and the strategic thinking. So we're going to look at that, and then we'll look at this thing of moving to an application, creating some kind of an online application tool where you can use Google Forms or SurveyMonkey or anything, where board members actually fill out an application that give you information when the time is right, so that you can see that the things that you've been looking for in your profile, in your job description, lived out, demonstrated in that. And then that'll all culminate into what is an annual affirmation agreement statement that's saying, as a board, we agree to do these things that we've said from the very beginning of the process. When someone comes on, we say, this is who we are, this is what we commit to. Then a healthy board ends up with having this kind of an affirmation statement that is reviewed, signed every year at the start of the year. And then it's also used for self-evaluation. How am I doing as a board member in fulfilling what I said I would do? And that includes all those things that we said that are commitments that are developed. So if we look at that, what is in that board service packet? Really, it's meant to be, the audience it's developed for is the potential new board member, and it's a pathway to board service. So you're helping them in one simple tool that is short, 5 to 7 pages, to be able to see what does it mean to be a board, and then what are the steps I need to take in order to work toward and make a decision if board service is the right thing and the right timing for us at this point. So it's kind of like the culmination of all strategic thinking on recruitment, putting together in one thing that then you can present to to candidates that and it attracts the right kind of candidates. So it needs to include your vision and mission, because that's one of the most central things that a board does. This is who we are. That's what you want them to be aligned to, who you are, what you're all about, the purpose you exist. If you have a statement of faith, that you should put it into your info packet so they see right up and from the beginning what you say people need to, they're about. Some of you don't use statements of faith. That's fine too. You don't need it. Some people have used statements of faith in a different way, but whatever that is, include that in that so they understand that job description that you develop. This sets clear expectations about what you are to be and to do. I also encourage everyone to have their meeting schedule and their expectations for board meetings. If you expect people to be at every board meeting, unless they have a great cause as communicated to the board chair, then say that. If you say 3 out of every 4, you could have the minimum of 3, whatever those expectations are. I say put the expectations and the schedule as you know it. If you schedule yours out a year, or one board that I'm working with, they schedule theirs out 2 years because they're international. That means international travel. Then put that in your information packet. Communication of the 3 hats. Helping board members see that there's a governance hat, that's when you're the board. There's a volunteer hat, that's when you step away and you use your skills and expertise in specific ways. And then there's a participant hat, that's when you show up, you represent the board, but you're not doing board activity, no authority there. Helping people understand that is critical. And then that annual affirmation statement that kind of summarizes it all up at the end of that. So all of these things are really critical to help people set those clear expectations. It helps busy people see, is this the right thing for me to do? And is it the timing for me to do it? They know what you need of them, the time commitment. It also will help people be able to clearly say no when it isn't the right thing. And actually, that's not bad. You want people to make an informed decision to do that. The one other thing that I've seen people put into their board info packet that I love, I didn't put it on here, but that is a decision-making process. And to define, how do we make decisions? And for those of you that have a very defined decision-making process for those big decisions, like we do to some discernment, we do this, we do this, I think that's helpful because it helps them understand a bit about your culture of how do you work together to make decisions in that packet. So it helps create an understanding of your distinctive board culture and how you work together to make big decisions. So board info packet, this is like the gold. If you walk away with something like this, and I would say this process to do all this, depending upon the time commitment, on the short end, if a board's working and they have a dedicated team, they could do all of this in 1 quarter and get it all done, hammered out. You could also take a year to develop this, and it's like taking steps. As you take each step, I was a friend of mine just recently took a vacation into South America, and she got herself a tree house. And she not only showed us a walking tour of the treehouse, but she also had a video of how this was built. And it was funny because it was like they built this ladder up the treehouse 1 step at a time. And they kind of did this fast speed thing. It's like they were building, hammering, building, stepping up, building, and then they built the platform, and then they stood on the platform. And I think that's a lot of what happens in this building foundations time is you build and you step on it. Then you build something new and you step and you use that thing, and you can adjust it if you need to, but you just keep building, using it. And by the time you get to this board info packet, when the board owns this, they're like, man, we feel like we've done something. We know who we are. And it just makes board members kind of sit taller and feel more confident. And then out of that, I love, only one group I've worked with did this. And so I added this here, but they used one of their best writers to craft a statement That is what a compelling recruitment message to generate interest. So they took all of this that they've worked on, and somebody wrote up a statement that could be used in communications that go out, in meetings with different people, in recruitment materials that basically say, here is the passion, the kind of people we're looking for that have a passion like this. Here's our unique culture and the kind of people that we're looking for and qualification. Here's the commitment. And it's just one little statement that's like a teaser that makes people go, gosh, I'm curious. I'm interested. I've never seen anyone do a statement like that before. That sounds intriguing. And I'll tell you, one group got me. I almost joined this one board just because of their board onboarding, the recruitment process. What I did is I stole all their materials. They said I could. They gave me permission and said they've done such a great job. And then because they had this kind of a statement, it just made me really intrigued of, what kind of board members you have. So I actually met with the board chair to find out more details. But, that makes you set apart when you do that and you capture, it's like a little hook. It's like putting the right bait on the hook when you're in the recruitment process. So that we just walked through 6 steps that really lead to, foundation laying. And that was a long foundation. But I didn't stop there, Jonathan. Anything else that came up just in laying those foundations and all that work that's kind of the preliminary questions that came up?
No, just a lot of really positive comments, affirmation of the importance of making sure all this stuff gets in place. And again, just the reminder that this is all stuff we're talking about before a person gets on the board, right? This is all the
Yeah.
stuff that needs to be in place to ensure that we end up with the right team. So, no, everybody just on the same page for sure.
Great. And I would even say it's what you do even before you start recruiting somebody. This is kind of all of us on the board getting our minds together and looking at who we are and defining strategically, intentionally, what do we need on the board? Who do we need? What's the kind of person? What are we looking for to be able to find those right people? Because if all you do is stick a hook on a fishing rod, you can throw it out there and be there all day, but you're not going to catch exactly what you want. You could catch, some pretty nasty things on there, meaning, stuff that's just floating in the water, or you can put the right bait on there and be intentional to catch the right kind of, in this moving away from fishing to the right kind of board member that you're looking for. So if you do all of that, now you're really ready to rock the recruitment process. So this is where, you now have some tools that when you find those right people, you can walk them through that pathway. So you've defined the pathway, but now here is what that pathway looks like. So this is what I'm defining as the pathway to board service. And it really starts by being strategic about looking at the relationships that are right around us. And this, I told Jonathan, I stole this slide from what Vanjie created, because when she had this arrow and she was looking at it in terms of bring people through fundraising, but in terms of this recruitment process, you want to cultivate relationships. This is a relational process. This is not transactional. You're not just looking to get somebody and bring them on and kind of coerce them, but it's looking for those right people out of the kind of relationships. And a lot of the materials around board recruitment, they say date, don't propose marriage on the first date. Figure out who these people are. So the idea is you're looking in your network to identify people that are the kind of people that, now that you know what you're looking for, you might find. So you suggest, and in the board, everyone on that job description, that one I showed you, it was one of their jobs is that they would suggest potential board candidates. So nominations can be made at any given time. If you have a committee, it goes to that committee. If you have one appointed person that they give it to, preferably not the CEO, unless you're in the very beginning stages of development. You want to move that away from that person, either to the chair or to somebody that's been designated by the board for recruitment and orientation and onboarding, or better yet, when you're more mature, to a committee that then that group they meet with that person that says, I've got this friend and I think they'd be great on our board. And they sit down to listen to why you think that person would be a great candidate. And that individual on the board that's dedicated to be focused on recruitment looks at the profile, puts that name in of the person, and starts just checking off who are they and what kind of skills and experience do they have to see if this might be a good candidate. And so you don't have to evaluate right then and there, but you just take those suggestions and you begin to identify those particular candidates and comparing them to your board profile that you've outlined. Then the next phase in that recruitment process is to explore interest. And I would say this is a section that is over time. If you're not in, that urgent moment where we have no board members, if you're doing this on an ongoing basis, you're going to be looking at individuals that are in that, and you invite them to an event, you invite them to help on a project, you invite them to volunteer, to come and take a tour, or to join a committee that we have, or a task force that we have, and bringing their expertise. That way you can see kind of what their, number one, their teamwork skills are like. You can see their interest and their passion, is it aligned to the organization? So you're exploring interest, not just in the board, but actually in the organization and the mission of that organization. And then at some point, when you notice that there are passionately engaged people in ministry that really could be great leaders on the board, then you ask, have you ever considered serving on a nonprofit board? Or would you have interest to look at our information packet for board service? So, this is a process that could, be over months, it could also be over weeks, but that way you find out a little bit about that person. And again, back to that dating analogy, you want to know how this person engages. You don't want to just bring on a high-level CEO who's used to making every decision super fast and driving hard and go, hey, they'd be great for our board. And you bring them on, you find out they're not a team player. They like making their own decisions, and they don't like when other people, have a different opinion. So explore their interests, see them in action, give them a board packet that now defines the kind of person you're looking for. And then going on to that third area is then you would have two people on your board sit down. And if that person, once they've got the board packet, you reach out to them and you say, we'd love to have a meeting with you. Two people come sit down, and it's like a relational interview. You get to know that person, their personality. What is the reason for their interest? What would their contribution be on there? What would they want to see? What would be fulfilling to them in board service? So you're having these conversations. And if you can meet with a spouse, it's also great, because sometimes spouses, I've seen a lot of CEOs say, my wife is incredibly gifted. She's organizationally minded. And instead of the CEO doing it, the wife does it. So it's interesting how different people will be fitting the right place on a board. But to even engage the spouse to understand, what is the expectations? What are they committing to? It really builds a better, stronger board member when you have spouses engaged in that process. And then if you feel like board service is a good fit, I'm not saying you'd have to do it the same day as the meeting. You could do it that day if you really have a strong sense going in. If your process of making decisions means we're going to, step away, the two people talk about it, pray about it, take some time. But eventually then you can provide an application, say, here's a link to an application. We'd love to have you fill that application out. And then you give them the ability to fill that out. Then you've got a bunch of information that's more detailed. It's a little bit more like getting someone's resume or their background information. So you've gone from giving them information about the board to now you are finding out a lot more detail about that. And then before you decide to make a recommendation to the board, there is this process of doing some typical due diligence. And that's where, if you've got a committee, that committee prays, they check the references. If it's an individual, they do that. They send the application to the board saying, everyone take a look at this person. We are praying and thinking about this. And you think about, how do we make those decisions? And then if that person is the right person that you think could be a good individual at this particular time, you can invite them to a board meeting as a guest, allow the board to ask questions, to, give it. And then if the board's ready to vote on it, you can ask the person to leave and then vote on it and do it that way. Or you can say, thank you for joining today. You're welcome to stay through the next whatever part of our board meeting just to get a sense of who we are. and then we'll get back to you. Either way works, but then you go through that process as a board to determine, is this the right person and the right fit for us? And if so, you make a vote, and then you formally invite that person to serve on the board. And hopefully by this point, they're ready to say, yes, this is like proposing. If you've dated well, they know who you are, they know your expectations, you know who they are, and they're ready to jump on the board. At this point, they're probably pretty excited given all that information. And I would say, just to reinforce that kingdom discerning board culture right from the start, as a board are looking at your culture, one of those critical things is, how do you make board decisions that are significant? And adding a new board member, that is a significant decision, doing that. But I love Acts 1, when all of a sudden the disciples are looking at us, like, hey, we're down a couple of disciples. We need to bring someone on. And they took the time to pray and said, Lord, show us who these two are that you've chosen to be a part of our ministry. This isn't just about pros and cons. This isn't just about following a process and boom. It's about, how do we discern what God is leading us to? And is this the right timing? Are there concerns that we need to raise? And giving your board members the opportunity to really speak their mind. So how do you make room for God to lead and direct, and not just us fall into this human thinking, human pathway that sometimes leads to the kind of leader that may be the wrong leader at the wrong time? So it's just, what does that look like to come to that place? So that kind of takes us to this place where we're looking at, how do we find good quality leaders? I would say they're not rocket science ideas, but the number one way people look for them is referrals, word of mouth. It's staff going, hey, I found somebody. If staff know you have this information packet, if staff know and you've shared what the board is always ongoing looking, or volunteers or past board members, the word of mouth gets around that way. And that's one of the most powerful ways to find great people that are aligned. Paying attention to your key volunteers and their families. Sometimes those people who've been faithful and volunteering for a long time could make outstanding board members, and even the people who are on your prayer team. I would always say, engage your prayer team as you're looking for board members. Have them regularly praying that God would bring the right people, and maybe some of those people would be interested. You may find having an intercessor on your board is one of the best decisions you ever made, to bring someone on that really can mobilize prayer for the organization. I've heard a couple of boards say that has been the best decision ever made. Share it with your major and mid-level gift donors, because those are people that have been investing in their finances. Maybe one of their spouses, maybe someone in their network would be interested. But always sharing that we're looking for great board members at different times, and making sure people know. And then, of course, even posting it in your regular communication. Posting on your website, in your newsletters, in the blogs from time to time. It's not like inundating people, but if it's an ongoing process, this should be something that you bring up pretty regularly, because you have different people engaging with your organization at different times. And it's like we're fishing out there, just waiting to see who God might be bringing. So we want to find people that are like-minded, that can serve well together, and look within the network that we already have to see who those people might be able to be. So before we shift over to looking at the orientation process, I spent the majority of time right up front on this front part, because laying the right foundation, and we've talked about this many times, when you lay a really strong foundation, you can build the building pretty quickly. And most of us have done recruitment in some capacity. We've done orientations and onboarding. But if you lay that foundation, it's outstanding. So, Jonathan, again, anything lingering before we jump into the orientation process?
No, a few questions about a couple general concepts, but we'll just handle those at the end. I would say keep plugging away.
Okay. All right. So with the orientation, I love this quote, because the reality is many board members have said, like the vast majority of them say, I didn't get in any orientation or onboarding process. I showed up at my next board meeting, had no clue what the topics of concern were, and kind of figured it out. But Rebecca says you don't want it to take a year for a board member to develop enough comfort and confidence to be able to even speak up at the board table. You want them to be able to hit the ground running and contribute quickly. So all that preliminary material that you provide is going to help them with that. So your orientation isn't about going back. You've given them a bunch of information that they need to know, but there's still a lot that for them to jump into the board and be able to step in where the board is and move forward, that needs to be intentional on that onboarding process to help people not only get up to speed, but feel integrated into the board, know who the people on the board are so that they can contribute meaningfully. That needs to be intentional as well. So they need to have access to information. They need to know history of the organization, understand the different roles that are on the board. Not all of that at this point has been outlined for those people because we've kept that tool that we use just for the information packet short enough that they get a glimpse, but they don't have all the details of what the board is and how it's made up. And then they also need to continue to see and experience the culture and the climate of the board, because that way people can, if they begin to hear from board members, they familiarize themselves with how do we function together? What does it look like? Is it the same thing that they said in the tools up front? So that orientation process, what to be included? I think most of us would definitely give the history, the strategic direction, where we headed. That could include the strategic plan, if there is one that's written. The programs, what are the primary programs or projects? If you have an annual impact report, provide the most recent one to that person. That gives them a big perspective of kind of what was happening, what happened last year from a public viewpoint. So that gives a lot of information. Obviously, budget and financial information for most people jumping in, if they aren't a CFO, that can get overwhelming. So it is helpful with a lot of these what to include, that there is a who to include that I'll touch really quickly in a moment. But that budget information to kind of give people that broader picture, they may need some tutorials along the way, but we got to answer for that. And then organizational structure. So how does the organization structure itself? Who are the key staff? So at this point, they may know the executive director, but they don't know who the people are right under them that are their next leadership team or who those key people are. Organizational communications and reports, so what things go out? Is there a newsletter? Should I sign up for that? All that kind of information that helps people feel like they really understand that organization and how we're doing. Now, we're not trying to fire hose someone all at once. This is going to be a process, and this could be a process of a year. Some organizations in their bylaws, they've actually created a year that they call the onboarding year, and it's before the first term. If you don't have that, there's no problem. It's not a requirement. I don't even necessarily say you have to recommend it, but I would say that it takes at least 6 months, which could be just 2 board meetings, or a year, that you want to help someone get oriented. Not that you don't want them to not know things right away, but to go, how do we give them the right information rather than fire hose somebody and that's overwhelmed and they don't understand anything anyway, to give them that information as they need it to get there. And then board governance materials. I mean, that's where they need to see the board schedule. Where do I find that? You listed it on the info packet, but now as a board member, where do I see our schedule? Where do I find the minutes? This is where they go to the next level, and they need to look at the bylaws. That needs to be part of the orientation, that they've looked at that. Of course, not by themselves, because can you imagine just sitting and reading bylaws and board policy manuals all by yourself? How boring. But those 2 things, they do need to know that they exist. They need to read through them, be able to ask questions. And then if there's committees, to understand how those things are made up and broken down, and other board members. That means that there sometimes are policies that have to be signed. If you've got an annual affirmation, you put it in the info pack, but now they need to have it and sign it. A conflict of interest policy, whatever policies exist that board members sign, that's, there is some documentation, paperwork, stuff that needs to be included. So that means people do need to be included in the process as well. So the board chair should be a part of the orientation, probably kicking it off, giving that context, giving access to material, giving an overview of the strategic direction of the vision and the mission, defining a few things. That is the more of the board's responsibility than the CEO to sit down, where the CEO can provide more of the picture of the organization. Who are my key staff? What are some of our impact reporting? That may even be that the executive director goes through the finance, or they might use a key staff person and say, I want you to sit down with our finance director, with our finance team. If the executive director is the finance person as well, maybe them, but they're doing a part of this and helping them see from an organizational perspective. I think the number one thing that will help people in orientation is the board mentor. Assigning every brand new board member a mentor that they can go to and ask every question that they wouldn't dare ask in a board meeting. But that means you set up a regular, maybe meet before a board meeting or meet the week or 2 weeks after a board meeting with your mentor. The mentor can walk through the bylaws and say, here's how we function from a high level practical perspective that makes the bylaws come alive. And that they'll just, there's not a lot in the bylaws, but it says, we have these committees, or we, have these different terms there, but give them some general, and then help them know in the board policy manual, what are we working on? Are there some policies that our recent policies? But that mentor will help that person really begin to, be integrated in and assimilated into the board group. That I would call kind of number one best practice takeaway for today. If you assign a board mentor to every new person coming in, and that board mentor probably doesn't know what to do, but even if they just have someone to ask questions to, both of them will benefit and learn. And of course, they need the officers, it's like the secretary. Who are these people? Some of them might be involved in the orientation. The committee chairs, if they're saying, I love with an orientation saying, go and visit all of the committees in this year. Just get a chance to see what they are focused on, what they're working on, if you have committees. So, committee doesn't necessarily have to be a closed group. It could be open to because they represent the board. So let new people come in and sit on a committee, a board committee, and they may even find a board committee that they'd be really excited to be a part of in that orientation process.
Hey, Heather.
Yeah.
Just a quick clarifying question from Joe on the slide, a couple slides back. You had mentioned evaluations. He just was wondering what you're referring to when you mention evaluations.
Yeah, good question. And that would be program. When I put it with the core programs, how do we measure our effectiveness in the programs? How do we know that we're actually accomplishing the purpose? So it's that, monitoring and evaluation of what we're doing. And that could be through storytelling. It could be through a formal system. But a board member needs to know not only what programs we have, but how do we evaluate their effectiveness according to our purpose? Great question. Thanks for bringing that up, because I kind of jumped over that. Good catch. This book, I think, is worth its $15 for every board member to get. It was written by a CPA accountant who has served on boards for over 25 years, chaired boards, and then now is a consultant with boards. And he said, what every board needs is a concise, accurate, comprehensive book that a busy executive could read. It's less than 100 pages. The main body of it is like 60 some pages, but it lays out clearly in 10 short chapters what you need to know about nonprofit board service. And I don't agree with everything he said in there, but that's even a great conversation. But the majority of what he shares is just so fundamental for people to understand, and it gives common language. And it gives that new board member some confidence of, okay, this is what this could look like. And so if you're a board that exists, this would be a great tool for you to go through together in that foundation lane to go, here's what they say that we should be doing. Here's what a board should be about. Let's look at this and even figure out, what do we need to focus on? And it's not rocket science stuff, but there's a lot of good things in there to clarify what the board's role is, what we should be doing. It's $15 on Amazon if you buy the book, but if you buy it in bulk, I'm sure it's less, or if you buy it on Kindle, even less. But there's a little promo. I highly recommend it. And I would say effective boards do read. They keep information flowing in. So there are some books you may want every board member to read. I know one board that I joined, we were required to read Ruth Haley Barton's book on discerning God's will together. because that was about the decision-making process that this board said, this is how we make this big decisions. So that was required reading. And so in the orientation process, that's a great mentor activity, is to have that person read it within a time frame and then talk about it. So there's reading for everyone. Some books could be read by the whole board at the same time, just keeping that going. And then some boards, you may want to assign different board members to read a specific book and they report on it, because that's a way that we can always be learning and growing together. And just a quick comment on board committees. Utilizing board committees to expose, I kind of hinted at this or said it, but it exposed new board members to potentially meaningful board work. These are the common board committees. It doesn't mean you have all of them. The primary two are the governance committee or the board development committee and the finance committee. Those are good two ones to start with. But I'm going to be talking way more about board committees in the Lunch and Learn, so that how you can utilize board committees to get a new person engaged and starting to contribute is really an excellent way to get people involved and contributing. So what's the checklist? So here's what I would say. If you just did the top 5 things, number 1, the board, not the CEO, actively should own the responsibility to recruit and build a healthy, engaged, effective board. It's everyone's responsibility. Everyone's engagement. You can delegate some of the specific activities, but we need to own it together. We need to feel this is who we are and this is what we're looking for. Build build and maintain this composition profile. So you know who you have, where are the gaps. That'll help you in knowing in what to recruit today. What are we looking for in this season? Develop a very defined process for nominating, recruiting, approving, and orienting potential new board members. That's a critical thing to be working on. And then the board, as they outline these expectations, we understand what is our role. And not only do we understand it, but we agree to it regularly and we evaluate ourselves on what we've said in that orientation. So we live out what we said we were going to do. And then that last checklist is that the board is prayerful and strategic in their recruitment and onboarding of all board members, so that we know that when we bring people on, we don't just go business as usual. We always know, hey, there's a new guy in the room. How do we help them be engaged and effective so they can contribute well to our whole board as we continue to provide leadership to the organization? And there's a bunch of materials here on our resource. We keep pointing that, Jonathan. We've been building this out, hard work, but there's a lot there. We keep putting new stuff on there. And some things we don't put on there because we want you to talk to us. So if something's on there you're looking for, reach out to us, because it's likely we have it, because Bob Andringa gave us his treasure trove of everything. And so now we're going to come back to these final questions, Jonathan. We're right at the hour. So I'll let you kind of lead us into the wrap up, and if people want to stay on and ask questions or what you'd like to do.
Yeah, we'll just take a couple more minutes and address a couple questions, and then I'll pray for us and we'll be done. Eloise asked early on when we were talking about sort of trying to understand a person's gift potential and sort of the wealth indicators of a potential board member. How do you really do that? How do you come to understand that? In the chat, we were just sharing a little bit, and I talked about, obviously, it really starts and depends a lot on relationships and understanding people and getting to know them and their journey a little bit. But what else might you say about that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's that relationship, because people get nominated to a board, somebody knows them and kind of know who they are. And the more they've been engaged, some of these people may already be giving. And those are great people. Some of you, your CRM has wealth indicators in them. And you can, if they're a potential person, stick them into your thing and do a little research on that. But it leans heavily on who knows them and what do they think. So this is definitely not we think they're going to give exactly this amount. But I think if you go back to what Vanjie said, is as you build that relationship and you talk to your board, sometimes you're going to even in that dating process, you might actually make an ask to a potential board member, depending upon how long that process goes, about an area that they seem to be more interested than in others. So it's not exact, just like everything before you get the application filled out is not exact, but it's your best guess based on relationships, what you think their capacity is. All right. Anyone else want to unmute yourself and speak up for any other questions that we haven't answered?
Your imperfect board member book that you recommended. One of my board members read that, loved it, bought copies for everybody on another board that he serves on. So highly recommend that. And then also, I don't think you mentioned this one this time, but the board and the CEO by Peter Greer and David Weekly, also huge. Recommended that in the past, and
Yes.
I highly endorse both of those. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Those are excellent. And we put I think it's up on our website. There is actually a list of resources and has a lot of different books like that. Those are two excellent books. So, Aaron, I see you have that hand up. You want to unmute yourself and
Yeah, just from the last training we had, I came back and mentioned to the governance committee the importance of a board member evaluation piece. And there's a lot of that's been kind of a point of conversation amongst the board for several years now. And board members, at least on our board, are very reluctant to do that. And it just, the feedback I received is it feels kind of, I don't know if icky is the right word. No one really wants to take it on, so I just some of your comments on that. Just what are your thoughts? How can we do that in a way that doesn't feel weird?
icky.
Yeah,
it is a good way of saying
Hey,
it.
Heather.
Yeah.
I want to let everybody run if they need to. So I want to spend time answering Aaron's question. And then Doug, if you can hang on for a few minutes, Doug had a question he wanted to raise as well. So let me just be sensitive to the time here, pray for you guys. And then anybody who wants to continue to stay on, please do that. We'll answer Aaron's question and then we'll move on to Doug's question as well. So let me pray for us. Heavenly Father, thank you so much just for this time today and just for all this great information. God, I just pray that you would just raise some of it to the surface for us, something that we need to give extra attention to, or something that we feel like we just need to adjust a little bit. Father, we just want to be the leaders that you want us to be, and we want to have good, strong teams that help us make more impact. So just continue to lead us in that way. And we thank you so much for this time. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, if you need to run, feel free. But if you want to hang on for a few more minutes and hear some more answers or raise some other questions, feel free to do that as well. So Heather, feel free to jump in on Aaron's question.
Yeah, the question is really good. And so, Aaron, let me ask you two questions. Number one, do you guys do a board meeting evaluation regularly for the actual meeting that you have, or an annual, how are we doing as a board evaluation? Do you have either of those in place?
no.
So I would say that's where I would start, because the meeting evaluation is like, we're evaluating how are we doing in our meeting. And I've got a tool, it's a Google, just a generic meeting evaluation. And what happens out of that is really great input that, like, the board evaluates itself and it's all anonymous, but things will come up like, we seem to be, people are coming on late. Can we start 15 minutes early? And so they're not pointing at anybody, but there's a little bit of evaluation going on that isn't direct, one individual or not. And that general, it's like, crowd, it's like going and corralling different people in an indirect way. And then the annual board evaluation, it takes the things that we've developed here in the beginning and says, how are we doing as a whole board? If you do both of those things, I think a lot of the evaluation happens already. Second question is, do you have any problematic individual board members on your board?
No, I wouldn't say problematic. I would just say
Like people
folks
that
who
don't
aren't
come or
meeting the
aren't
expectations.
engaged?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So the other thing that I think helps with that is the signing of an annual affirmation statement. So if you have to sign that these are the things we've committed to, and every year I have to sign that. When I was a board chair, we would literally say, okay, everyone got, somebody, the secretary sent it out, everyone got it. The next board meeting, I said, hey, I brought it up. I just said, are there any questions on the things that we've agreed we're going to do? And as a board chair, sometimes I highlighted, last year we didn't actually have everyone financially giving in the first quarter. We'd love to have that happen this year. So I like to do these things a little bit ahead rather than after the fact. But I did have to take on a board, talking to different individuals. That I did as a board chair, not as, on that committee, because that was managing that way. The other thing is participation events. If that's on your annual affirmation, everyone's signing, it's kind of like, this is a reminder on the front end, we're preventing avoidance. But then if there is that issue, I would say that the board chair and the governance chair probably would be the best people that say, by nature, we need to figure out what's the right way to address individuals if they're not fulfilling what we've defined we need to do, we've signed we're going to do it, but we're not doing it. And I've been there, that's not fun. But I've also seen the one person I had to chase on one of those actually in the end said, I really appreciate the fact that you held me to this because I was avoiding it, for blah, blah, blah reasons. And he said, but you held to what we said we're going to do. I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And I said, great. Are you going to do it this week? We've been having that conversation. So they actually valued being held accountable because we were kind in that process. Is that helpful to what your question is?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah. So if you want
Awesome.
any examples of those, I can just, share those Google Docs with you. Just email me and let me know.
Great. Doug, fire away on some alignment stuff.
So my question was regarding alignment, and it's such a broad word when it comes to making sure people, are connected to the vision, values, all of that. What are red flags, like no's to certain individuals versus, oh, this would be really good for diversity's sake on our team?
That's a great question. And boy, that was one of the things I thought I really didn't handle any of how do you go through that process and then you go, okay, we're not going to propose. We're not going to ask them to join, or we asked them to join. And then some of our board members said, I'm not sure this is the right idea. I think that's a place that if you get to that place, number one, you are indicating you are a relatively mature board, that you have made space for people to have differing opinions and people are willing to share them and have a conversation about. That is one of my favorite signs of a healthy board, is that we're willing to talk about things and not just, do the group think and jump in there. You want your board to speak up and to go, I have a concern. I look at that and say, giving people room to share, what is it? Can you be specific? What do you know? Or what's your gut? What is God showing you? And then bringing that openly to the board in high confidence that we trust each other to really sense this. And, and then the board, when it votes based on, what we've discussed, and you might have not a majority vote, but giving people room to say, here's my concern. If it's not the right timing, people usually self-select, go, I just don't have that time. Or you can say back to the person, it just seems like you've got a lot going on. Maybe another time may be better. That board that I said did this really well, that happened with me. I went through that process. I almost joined the board, and both of us decided I really don't have the time to give to this, that I would need to. Because actually they were looking for a board chair and they kind of had an indirect thing. They wanted me to take a board chair role. And I was like, no, I can't do that. So it wasn't the right timing of that. So it takes confidence, courage to do that. But I think those red flags are, if you know who you are as a board, and these are the things that make us who we are, if this person really kind of my gut says that's just not who they are. That core versus they're going to have differing opinions. Then I would say if that person is bringing diversity, does their different opinion, are they willing to surrender to the whole after they've made? Can they buy into a one voice, or are they going to never let it go? They're a dog with a bone, and they might, take on other people and try to divide the board. That's the teamwork thing. I would start to go, do your due diligence, do some of your, follow up on their references to find out how do they handle sharing differing opinions. Do they do it in a mature way or not so much?
I'll just end by saying, feel free to reach out and schedule some coaching time for follow-up if we if you want to dig in on some more stuff here. And certainly Heather's available and I'm available to continue the conversation. So thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Have a great
Good to
rest of
see you
your
all.
day and week. God bless.